Welcome. This is the Ask the MMTIC Expert session, another of many that we've had and many that we hope to have in the future. And the star of the show is Dr. Elizabeth Murphy, who is the author of the MMTIC assessment. You're all experienced with it. That's why you're here. And this assessment is published by the Center for Applications of Psychological Type. I work there. My name's Rob Rothschild. I'm the marketing director here. And our goal is always to try to engage you and create a community around the MMTIC. So, Elizabeth, that child is driving me crazy. What can I do?
Oh, I think everybody feels that way at least one time in their life, if not one time each week. And that's why I loved when you said earlier that you might be grumpy in the winter. That so much of what we do with type is not just what we do with the child, but the interaction of the child with the adult in the moment. And some moments we're more receptive to differences than others. So what I had hoped we might be able to accomplish today is almost like on a dual level, that part of it talk about what are some actual pieces of information or suggestions or practical applications of type concepts for families or for schools, and the other also to talk about your individual successes that you've had working with families or schools or educators, or any bumps you've run into when you've been out there in the field working with type and educators and parents and children. Because sometimes I think it's difficult once getting started, but obviously if you're here you believe that this is valuable information in some way. And if the crux of the need is how do I make it applicable, how can I make it realistic for parents, or how can I make it realistic for teachers, we can certainly go in those directions. So I want you to feel incredibly comfortable asking some very specific questions. Most of the time when I'm working with families, it seems to be split into two levels. One is a need level. You know, this child is driving me crazy. I don't know what to do with this child. Why do they have to do things this way? I can't believe they're like this. And the other one is general knowledge. I just want to understand more and more and more about children's thinking, children's actions, children's behaviors, so I can provide a very rich environment for my child to grow and develop. I do the best to provide them a way that works for them rather than provide them a way that worked well for me as the parent. So we can go in any of those directions that you'd like to start out with, but those seem to be the two presenting reasons why somebody has ever asked me about understanding type. But I do know that almost every person I've ever worked with about it has the same reaction that many adults do, is that, wow, once I understood this about people, life just got easier, life just got better, which is so nice, you know. I did a training recently, and all of a sudden this mom, we were doing JP, and this mom goes, oh my gosh, I've just had a huge aha. And I said, what was it? And she said, I've just realized I have been nagging my child to death over her homework because I think she needs to sit down and do it right away. And she keeps saying, I'll get to it, I'll get to it, I'll get to it. And the child was, I guess, 12, 13 years range. And I said, well, does she get to it? And Mom says, yes. But I always worry that she's not and that she won't plan well, so I kind of push her to do it, which is a real common response when we have families working with homework issues and children who have a style that's more of that deadline-activated style. Because they're afraid they won't get it done, they spend a lot of time nagging. But when you do the nagging, you send a secondary message to the child that says, you cannot direct yourself. You need me to be your outside agent, making sure you can get through life okay. And that really isn't the message we want to send them. We want them to feel the autonomy of self-management, that they can handle it, that they can take care of it. And if something happened and it didn't work out this time, well, they'd be able to solve that problem and fix it for the next time. So we know that a lot of children with that perceiving preference struggle with learning timing. They are not born with a good sense of timing the way children with a judging preference have. Those children seem to actually come into life with this internal clock that says, it's going to take me this long to get it done. And just in case, I'll put some extra minutes in there to be sure that I can get it done. The perceiving child growing up underestimates how long something is going to take. So they might need to have a little bit of data collection to say, all right, you think you can get all those definitions written in 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Let's just time it for the next 2 times, 3 times, and just see how long did it actually take you. It might be shorter, it might be longer, but that's what they call data. So let's gather some data and see if we can make this a decision that is based on some good, solid information. Then it's not you managing them, it's the data managing them. So if all of a sudden they look at it and say, oh, it took me 25 minutes the first time, but it only took me 20 minutes the second time, but the third time it was still 21 minutes. Then you say, okay, now that's great information for you for budgeting. How much time do you need to have in order to complete the homework assignment? It changes the role of the parent from the nagging parent who's trying to make you do something to that facilitative shadow that's helping you use your own skills when you're working with homework and with other kinds of different issues like that. When your style is very different than your child's, it's sometimes hard to appreciate. And if you don't know your style, you may not respect when your energy drives are too low to be accommodating. My rule of thumb has always been the one with the greatest need wins. And there will be truly days when I came home from work and I had the greatest need of anybody because I'd already been home for a little bit and I was just coming home, and I could get hit when I walked in the door with 5 and 10 questions. I'm going to do this, what about that, da 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 da. And I used to tell them, if you need an answer right now, the answer is no. If you want another option, give me 5 minutes just to regroup, 5 minutes. Well, then they were easily able to do that once they recognized, oh, she needs to have that transition moment between job 1 and home. And there was no problem with it, but I had to be smart enough to ask for it, to recognize that I actually was going to be too tired to think of alternatives. I might think of a good quick answer, but I wouldn't always sit down and think of alternatives with them. But again, that same skill that we're saying we want the children to have for self-management, I think we want to give to the parents also. That they will say, is this what my child needs in the moment, or might they need something else?
That's great, Elizabeth. I wish my parents had done some more of that, or myself as a parent. We have a question from Ali. Did you want to ask a question, Ali?
I think Elizabeth basically answered it in the further conversation that she had. It was just the JP thing sort of raised. It just sort of made me aware of a lot of our clients. It's one of the areas that there's a lot of debate, because the parents are like, I need to serve dinner at 8 o'clock, and I need them to finish their homework. So it's all about the child saying, well, I don't do my work in that way. If they've become self-aware, if they've done the assessment, and then with just managing it within a family environment, so just being able to say as a parent, that's great, but you need to do it to fit in. You need to do it by a certain time. So managing the deadline, really.
Right, and the parent can have an earlier time than the child would self-select.
Yeah.
Because they have to check it. So they could easily say, you know, I need to have it done by 7 o'clock so that my brain is still alive a little bit and I can look at it and check it. But if you check it every night, pretty soon some kids get to the point of like, well, I don't really have to be careful because mom will pick up if I added wrong, or mom will pick up if I spelled it wrong. And so one of the things that I recommended recently on the what's it called, Rob? The Facebook page, Type for Kids.
Oh yeah, Type for Kids.
That the parents actually make it into a game, especially if they have a perceiving child who love a sense of play. They get far more work done when there's play associated with the work. They're still doing the work, but there's just a sense of joyfulness and laughter that makes the work so much more reasonable. But I said, roll the dice. And if it comes out an odd number, that means parent checks.
Right.
But if it comes out an even number, that means you stand with what you did. So the child never knows whether you're going to be checking it or not checking it. And it's going to be the luck of the draw, so now it's not you managing them. It's this other thing, this chance that is managing it. But it also gives the parent a chance to model two ways of feedback. When there's no checking of the work, what the parent can do is model the really positive feedback about, I'm so proud of you, you got your work done, you handled it yourself, you're totally in charge of it. The teacher is going to look at this, and I don't know what they'll think or say when they read it because I don't know what you wrote, but I am very proud of you that you've taken on that autonomy of getting it done. But if the dice roll says you check their work, now you're going to check with eyes that are critiquing eyes. So what you would say to them, my job right now in reading your work is not just to see what is wonderful about it, but to actually find a flaw in it, or to look if there is a flaw, or to look for, has it met the necessary minimal standard of excellence? Do you need to do more in order to have a quality product? Because teachers can look at your work two ways. One way is to say, have they done the work adequately? And they're just looking to give you the grade, and they may only mark your errors. But the other way they may look at your work is to say, wow, that's very impressive, and you've done a wonderful job. So one's kind of supportive of your effort and your self-management, and the other one is giving them practice receiving critique. For the young F child, that's a very hard thing to do at first, because the young F child associates all criticism of their work with criticism of their human nature. They don't separate work from person. Sometimes, I heard a child say recently, mom asked them how their homework was done, if it was all right, and they said, I thought you said only test grades counted. Okay, that is true. Homework doesn't count for a grade. It only counts for you to practice. And then it doesn't really matter if I have a mistake in it. That is true, unless that mistake also means that you're going to have a problem doing your test correctly. No, don't have a problem doing the test, but I just don't worry about whether I have a mistake in my homework. Well, that particular situation was one where the standard wasn't well set. It should have been set, do the homework if you want, but if you choose to do your homework, do it with the excellence that's within you. Don't diminish your standards, your personal standards, just because somebody else isn't going to review it or that it's not going to count for a grade.
Well, that's not fair. I don't want to do it.
Well, if the teacher's not even going to look at it, I would say then you don't have to do it. The homework is supposed to help you, not just be something you have to do kind of thing.
I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself.
No, I think that's exactly what the kids are going to say, Rob, exactly.
Hey, I want to interrupt you and let you know that Kevin has a question. Let's see what he has to say.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This stuff fascinates me. My wife and I fell in love with type 30 years ago, and as our kids grew, we, worked and figured out what preferences they had, and it not only helped in helping them with their homework, but for them to understand each other.
Exactly.
I don't have the opportunity to work in schools. I usually work more one-on-one. And my question is, if you have the opportunity to have the parent take the MBTI first so that they understand more of the theory and what's going on, is that preferable to do that first before working with a child?
It's a great question. Actually, I don't do it first, I do it with. So I have the adults take the MBTI and the children take the MTIC, and we all sit down and have a feedback session together. Depending on the age of the child, if they're young, what I'll do is I'll talk about the differences with everybody for maybe 5 or 10 minutes for one of the scales. Then the kids can go take a play break, a video break, whatever they need for 10 minutes, and I'll talk with the parents about how they can use that information in parenting. Then we'll call the kids back and do the next scale. Now, if the children are older, if they're in the teens, then they can, of course, stay for the whole session and you can do everything together. But I find it works out very nicely with the parents learning about their preferences at the same time that the children are learning about theirs. And the kids are sometimes amazing because they'll say things like, when you start describing the differences, I bet I know which one my mom's going to pick, and I bet I know which one my dad's going to pick. And they'll be like, really, what do you think it would be? And then they're amazed when the children are spot on. But when you live with somebody, you get to know them. Type gives just a vocabulary for us to talk to each other about it and to know that you're going to be okay even if you're not like me. I think that's the greatest, greatest gift. I said, my son is an ESTP. He's an adult now. And my daughter was INFJ. She is also an adult. But they were children, and they had to do the dishes. My INFJ daughter would go in, do the dishes, and be done and get out of there. And my ISTJ husband thought she was just amazingly wonderful. When my ESTP son went in to do the dishes, he did part of the floor, part of the counter, part of the dishes, and it drove my husband crazy. And he said, the boy's never going to make it. He's never going to make it in life if he can't just start finishing one thing at a time. So whenever it was my son's turn to do the dishes, we made my husband leave the house. We said, go take a walk. If you come back and there's anything wrong with the quality of the job that he did, you may give him corrective feedback. But if it was his way of getting it done that was annoying you, then recognize he's going to get through life in a very different way than you do, and we have to be able to respect that. And 99% of the time when he returned, everything looked great. But he could not, in the beginning, tolerate what looked to him like a tremendously inefficient system for completing a task. But for the ESTP, it was a playful, fun way of getting work done, which absolutely increased the efficiency for them, not the observable efficiency that an ISTJ would have looked for. So yes, parenting, parents knowing their type is important, but I don't know that it has to be before the children. I think it can actually be done with the children.
Thank you.
That's great. Ali, did you want to ask a follow-up question? And then Jeff, you're next. Ali?
Yeah, no, I mean, I could talk more about the family workshops and stuff, the family work. But the one question I had for Elizabeth is, if you were to do individual, like a class of students, say 16-year-old students, and do a group feedback. Up until now, we've really promoted one-to-one feedback. But there's an option that we're looking at doing, say, classroom feedback, so that it's done more as a group of children as opposed to one-to-one. What would you say to that?
Oh, I do it all the time. I do it with children as young as 7.
Right.
I actually prefer it because you get to do activities that demonstrate the differences. They're just so clear to the kids right away. One group I used, they were about 10-year-olds. And we used the Momo Millie stories that Diane Ferris wrote about the two dogs, and they were talking about how the two dogs like to study differently. The kids were like, "Oh, that is me. That is me. If I go to the library, I cannot just sit in that library and just sit and look at books. I mean, I gotta find some people we can talk to, and I gotta get up and I gotta do stuff." And the other one goes, "I know, and I hate it. So when you say go study with me, I think, oh my gosh, I can't do this with you because you study so differently than me." It's like, right. So now you've learned a little more about yourself, and you've learned a little bit more about your friend. So if you're not able to be helpful to each other during study, could you figure out a way to study separately but get together at a certain time afterwards? And then all of a sudden, it wasn't rejecting their friendship to say, I'd rather just go study by myself. I do better if I can just go read it and memorize by myself than doing it your way. And the kids get it. They get it. So I'm in favor of group feedback with the kids just because doing any of the splitting activities clearly demonstrates the difference for them.
And with the group feedback, because we do workshops, but not with the full extent of the feedback, but just sort of type awareness. With the full feedback, say they've done the online assessment, do you go through a self-assessment with each of the children, like as a group, and then they self-assess, and then you do the reports after that? How does that work from your side?
Yes, we do that, except instead of just doing a self-assessment from the characteristics, we have in the little booklets that are those like introductory books for the different ages, you know, there's one for the younger children. Okay, they would do the I am a good student. So they would look to see when they read each one of the dichotomies, checking to see which one sounds more like them in their way of studying and processing learning.
Yeah.
Then they would do the self-assessment also based on the descriptions that follow. And then you would give them their results, and they would have two self-assessments to compare against the printed results.
But that would be done as a group, as opposed to because that's what you do. That's what I use one-to-one. But as a group, you would do the same thing, or just with exercises to show the differences.
When I do it with a group, each child has their own book, so they can.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, but the books are very inexpensive. They're less than $5, I think. Right, Rob?
Yeah,
the
two of them
brilliant.
are $4 each, and then the high school one is $6.
Oh, $6. Okay.
Yeah.
Because it has the career stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Elizabeth.
They're a great introduction to a school. If you take those books in and show, you know, it's a really good way to explain what a school can expect from it. I think they're a great tool, actually. They're really good.
Oh, well, thank you. And so have you done that with schools? Because I would like to hear from folks about when they've worked with families that were successful or when they worked with schools and were successful.
Yeah, we've done it. I would say our most successful work has been with families and one-to-one with specific, you know, when you said earlier there were two types of approaches. The one was for there's an issue here, and the other one was just this learn more. So we've had quite a lot of people going for interviews or, you know, some issue. And then we have worked with schools, but in the UK at the moment it's still a bit of a challenge to get into schools, whether it be budget or just knowledge of what we're doing. Start talks to teachers and staff, you know, just to get them aware of type and aware of the MMTIC tool, MMTIC tool. So we're making steps in the right direction.
Cool.
And the workshops that we've been successful in so far have been more to do with just the awareness of the model, as opposed, so it's just as opposed to assessment. So we've done a lot of awareness, raising awareness of personality and self-awareness, and that it's okay to be me and it's okay to be you. So that's more of just a general workshop, and that's gone down very well.
And that piece is perfect to break the model into people's level of conscious awareness, but it's not as powerful for helping the child learn about self-management. And when they can learn that
Absolutely.
self-management, then all of a sudden they approach things very differently. So we had that sensing child again. I wrote on type on the Facebook MTIC Kids type tips. The little girl was a sensor, and her friend was saying how hard it was for her to come up with ideas for their project because the teacher, in their eagerness to give you freedom, made the directions so vague that it was hard for her to pick, and so she was feeling quite stupid. And the other little girl, whose family is well aware of type, told her, oh, it may not be about being smart, it might just be your personality. It might be that you just don't think that way, and you need to ask some more questions so that you can figure out what's the best topic for you. Because for the sensing child, the specificity of the directions actually inspires greater creativity than vagueness. For the intuitive child, it's the vagueness of the direction that inspires the creativity. So for the children to even begin to say, oh, I might look at it that different. So for me to have new questions about it, or for me to have a different system for picking my topic, doesn't make me smart or not smart. It's not about smart. It's just about my way of processing and thinking. It just changes the attitude the child has about their proficiency within the schools.
Absolutely. Well, that's the one bit of advice we give a sensing child or an intuitive child. I mean, more on this side, it's a sensing child, is that no teacher is ever going to turn them away if they want clarification on their homework or a project.
Right.
So we sort of script some questions and we practice some questions, whether they're introverted or extroverted, and we just, they can then go and say, do I understand this correctly? Is this what's expected of me? And really go through the steps so that they know what, they clearly know what to do. And it's had hugely positive benefits for these children.
Excellent. It's so nice when the theory proves itself time and time again. It's like,
it always does. Honestly, it's the most rewarding job. Is, you said earlier, to see the eyes light up, and honestly, I just can't get enough of it. It's incredible. It really is. It's very enlightening.
Well, I want to jump in here and say that Jeff has a question, but Ali, thanks a lot, and I love the name of your company. Her company is Fabulous Moi. It's a good one. So Chantal has a question I'll get to, but Jeff, you're next, and also Ann too. So Jeff, go ahead.
Well, my N puts me all over the board, so my INFP, Elizabeth knows that, I think. So I'll try to narrow it down to a question or so. I took some notes, and the big thing that it's really understanding differences. I mean, even the I do step 2 with all the travel college employees, and there are a lot of natives there, of course, over half of them, and a lot of the women as mothers with young children. Once they take the MBTI there, they say, oh, well, my son does this, but my daughter is this, and maybe they should take this, type thing, and so forth. So it's really important from that standpoint when you're talking about involving the parents. It's really a key thing there, I think.
And I'm amazed at how many adults are not aware that there is a tool to measure it in children. Because, they always say, well, can they take the MBTI? And it's like, if they're of sufficient age, but there are tools that they can use. And the other thing is, I always want the children to have a chance to tell us where they think they are, because sometimes parents, how do we say this? Parents see what they want to see and ignore what they want to ignore. So like I had a J parent and a child that I would have suspected might show more perceiving nature than judging nature. And at first the parent was very open to that. But then the parent would say, no, I think there's J. I think everything's J. J is what I'm seeing. Well, the child's probably F, okay? So as the child is aging, she's doing whatever the mom wants her to do.
Right.
And she's behaving in that way. But that may not be her inner core of energy. Her inner core will probably be the F, but it may not be J. So if you start teaching and treating the child as if they are J, you may be actually making life a little bit harder for them. So I say, even if you know they're a P or you know they're a J and you're positive of it, even if they've taken the indicator, I still always encourage the families to offer them both choices. So would you like to get this done ahead of time, or you feel like you'll get your energy later and have some energy to get it done, as long as it's done by the time it's due? Which would work better for you today? And then they could change their mind tomorrow, but by offering them both, J children are going to typically choose, let me get it over with so I have lots of time to play. And perceiving children are going to more typically say, I got time, I can figure it out, and I'll get it done later. I'm still thinking. But even if I know what they are, I want to still give them the options. So if I had to say, what gift could you give to parents? If you had to say what kind of training, it would be to help them learn how to voice those dichotomy opposites, the E and the I, the S and the N, the T and the F, and the J and the P, and let the child self-select each time. A pattern should emerge, but if development goes the way I believe it goes, there should be times when they don't follow that pattern, when they actually say, well, let me try that other side. Let me see what it's like if I do it this way. And it is the trying both sides, trying in sensing way and intuitive way, that they discover, who am I and who am I not? So our goal is not to make parents wise just about what is their child's type, but to make them wise about what are good type options to offer my child, and that I can then validate for them and know particular issues that are going to come up depending on the child's preference. So I know that T children, young T children, struggle tremendously dealing with incompetence. They just do not forgive themselves for not being able to do everything excellently, and they get upset with life because they were not able to be the best.
Elizabeth, if I could, what you said about giving the kids options, I mean, that follows the whole scheme of the way your MTIC books are set up for the children, to give them choices. From the beginning, you're asking them that. And
yeah.
I always remember a story you told about the T and the F child that the parent had, and about cleaning the room and so forth. But
do you remember it well enough to retell it? I don't remember that one.
I can't retell the details, but it had something to do about she had two children to clean up and she wanted to clean up their room, and she says, my one child, my son, was, I think, the story, that he's just so obstinate. He talks back to me. He says, no. He said, why do I have to do this? He said, I need to know why I need to do this. She said, because I said so. But why? But why? What's the reason, and so forth? It's the questioning, But whereas as the girl said, she said, oh, okay. But it wasn't because she just didn't want the argument. She didn't want the confrontation. So the T and the F went out there.
Yeah, that would be a good example.
The question I have, if I could ask this question, though, with that in mind, when the kids take it, and I've seen this happen a lot, when the kids take it, have you found when the kids take it, parents come to you and say, can we take it?
Can we take the MTIC?
Yeah, well, no. Well, can we take this test? Can we take? They say test. The parents will say that, but can we take this assessment or whatever? Once they know the kids have taken it and they see the results, do the parents get interested? If the parents are not able to be involved to begin with, do they come back and say, we'd like to do this?
So I have found that happen when I've done it in. Whenever I do it in a schools, and that's more likely when it would happen that the children would learn about it before the parents. And I will do a whole session of feedback with the kids at school, and after the kids have finished the verification activities, then we would have a PTA night, a parent night, where you could come in and we're going to teach you about these differences and give you a chance to see your child's results. And I would frequently get parents who would come up afterwards and say, I would love to take something like that, or I took something like that at work a long time ago, but I don't remember. Is there a way I could take it again? And so absolutely. Right now, the MBTI has gained such notoriety and popularity, but unfortunately, the good use of the tool has not. So instead we see on Facebook, what's your favorite kind of hell, depending on your type, or what kind of kitchen do you want, or why are you still single? But it showed up on Trivia Crack as one of the questions. I took a picture in for framing of a poster from an APT conference in 1990, and it had imagery drawn. It was Bonnie Boozer's pictures of imagery that went with each of the function-attitude combinations. And the boy who was framing the picture said, "Oh, I'm that one over there, the introverted thinker." I was like, okay, 10 years ago, there would have been no way somebody who was measuring frames in Holly Hobby store would be able to say, I'm an introverted thinker. It would not have been as popular, but right now it is. However, using it well, I'm not seeing that piece expanding as much as I'm seeing the trivialization of what do the results mean expanding. Maybe you all have a different experience, but it concerns me.
I think a lot of the questions we get when we use it at schools is, why can't we just use some of the free stuff that's online?
Right.
And I've taken all those tests online, and all the results say is what you've answered in the questions. So it's just sort of a rewrite of the questions. So it's very unreliable. It's not valid at all. And it's quite an easy argument, I think, to have with them, or discussion to have with them, because the quality of the feedback that you get from the report on the MTIC report is it's completely different to what you get to the free tests. You get what you pay for, basically. You just don't get the quality at all.
No, you're absolutely right. Between the workbook and between their individual report, the child really gets a true opportunity to explore who they are across different venues and to appreciate differences in others. And yeah, they're not going to understand that most instruments online have no supporting psychometric properties, or they put it out online hoping to get enough people, but then those people don't do the verification part or go through all of the rigor that you have to go through. But it's not just the kids that are asking that. All the adults are asking it too. I could take this one for free, and I just, as you say, well, they are free for a reason.
Hey, speaking of resources, Elizabeth, Chantal asks, for both, I think, family sessions and individual sessions, what kind of follow-up can we as practitioners provide to the kids or the family, after they've gone through the session? I hope I have that right, Chantal.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Okay, good.
So just as you would do if you have ever done team building with an organization or any leadership guidance within an organization, it's the same thing. You pick a topic of application. So if I finished with a family and we've done the intro session and they said, we'd like to meet again, because it's really life coaching. That's all it is. I would say, super. Shall we focus our energies on household responsibilities and school responsibilities, or should we focus on communication, or should we focus on what pushes your button to get you stressed? Let's pick our focus so that when we come back together, we'll learn a little bit more about ourselves within that context. And that's so much more workable. If they wanted to do several sessions, then you would just keep changing the context. What is it? But they're really looking for nice ways to apply it in their life. So that's how I would use it if I were working with a family on an extended amount of times.
Okay,
does that answer your question, Chantal?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Good.
Okay, and so if there are others who are doing it differently and you want to share how you're doing it, feel free.
Well, I know Anne has a question. Anna, you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Hi, Elizabeth. Extending out, if you have the opportunity to work with a family like on an extended basis, I'm wondering, do you always only use the dichotomies, or do you ever get into the cognitive dynamics at all?
Oh yeah, it depends on the age of the kids. But even if we were doing young children, and I was like, so you've got an important choice to make. I teach 5-year-olds how to use the problem-solving Z, where you look at the sensing, the intuitive, the thinking, and the feeling. So then I would say, if they were old enough where they might have a dominant auxiliary pairing already working for them, I'd say, so the one driving the car is that ST side of you, but what about the NF that might also be a part of you that may not get its voice loud enough for you to hear? What do you think somebody with those preferences might ask in this situation? But you get the kids, even at a very young age, can figure out the kinds of questions they have. So with something, it's like, have we ever done this before? Do you know anybody who's already tried it? Is there any questions about how it all works that we should ask before we make a choice? Intuitive, are there other ideas? Are there other possibilities? Should we consider other choices? Or is this the one we want to go with? Thinking, is it something we can afford? Do we have enough time? Can we actually do this project? And is it going to work for us and maybe even others? Which is the systemic approach for thinkers. And the feelers, are you going to feel personally proud of this product? And do you think others are going to enjoy this product? And how do you feel that, or think that your teachers and your parents will react when they see the quality of this work? They get it. They totally get it. So I just say, okay, what's our 4 kinds of questions we're going to ask? You know, experience and the information, possibilities, effectiveness, and then impact. And they get it. They just get it. So they don't know that they're using 4 function pair combinations. But they do know that there's 4 kinds of questions to ask before they make a good decision. Now, depending on the age of the child, they may go right back to the 2 favorite or the 1 favorite one, because that's the piece that's driving them the most. That's the clearest and easiest for them. But getting them used to the idea that there's more to this than just your first thought. There's other ways of thinking. And since we're going to be doing this, we might as well make sure we've got it as comprehensively as we can. They're okay with that. It's like just bringing the language down to something that they can understand what you're talking about.
Does anyone else have a question? Feel free to jump in.
Well, this is Jeff again. Elizabeth, you just said something that caught my attention. Depending on the age of the child, and the reason that caught my attention, I'm thinking, okay, because I'm working a lot on research and working with the thoughts and theories of young and indigenous tribal people, and what's called the arc of life, which of course begins at birth, at least the physical side, early childhood, you know, and then youth and so forth. That there are, at an earlier age, kids are more accepting, they learn more, the tribal people say they're more passionate, they have, you know, all sorts of enthusiasm, so they're more open to learning. But as they get older, they get a lot of the outside world thrown on them. So I guess from what I just said and what you said, depending on the age of the child, what did you mean by that in terms of what I just said?
If you have a child prior to the age of 5, and go easy on the number, it could be 6, it could be 4, right, but they're really still very much unconsciously driven. So we're going to see demonstrated their preferred energy path that will develop as they age, but right now is still very much still in the unconscious. But when you get to around that school age, and we're putting kids into school so much younger, so it could be the 4, 5, or 6, they actually quit listening to that inner voice. You said they become more open and more flexible. Well, what I think is happening is they're ignoring their inner drive and they're paying attention to social cues, because that part of their life is mastery in the world. What do I need to do to be successful in the world? So they're taking their cues from the world. And because that's the age when information acquisition is so intense, it's part of giving you all the tools to be successful in life, to be masterful, to know I'm going to choose this and I'm going to go for music rather than art, and I'm going to go for this rather than that. But as they get older and they start to get around 12 and 11 and 13, they start now going back to listening to that internal voice. It's calling for consciousness. It's calling for time and honor. So instead of seeing it as they're worn out by all of the things that have happened in life, they're going back to listening to that inner voice, which is a whole new source of energy, but it's not managed energy yet because they've ignored it for a while. So there's an awkwardness that comes in this phase when it's kind of like, I don't know, I just don't think I ought to do that, but I don't know why. I don't know what's going on. It just, no, I don't want to do that. And so the resistance, I think, is because they're switching channels. And in that switch of channels, then, when they start knowing who they are and listening to who they are, and they get this awareness of differences in style that we can teach them, then all of a sudden they're gaining a comfort with this conscious control that brings them back into being productive and independently driven within the social system that they're living, instead of just being driven unconsciously. So I could see the same behavioral expressions happening with the two ways that we've described it, but I'm seeing it more as part of the developmental nature. You do need to know where the child is, but you need that for adults too. If I'm working with a 20-year-old feeling preferenced person and you give them critique, feedback, they can feel devastated. When I'm working with a 45-year-old F, they may or may not feel devastated because they may be to the point where their feeling function has developed enough that, okay, this is just feedback. It's not about our relationship. I'm not a person who believes in the sequential nature of development. I believe it's a spiral. So I believe that each of the functions in its attitude is developing constantly from birth until death, but that we call them little tornadoes or dust devils, where each one is a spiral where you're going to have an active phase and a rest phase and an active phase and a rest phase. But all four could be happening at the same time, but the one that is most enjoyable to you is the dominant, so that's where you'll put more energy and have it go at a higher rotation and wider rotation, and therefore becomes more encompassing. But that an F at 10 and 14 and 25 and 55 are just different. They're very different. They're all still F, they're all still value driven, but they're different. And I think the last talk we did, we mentioned some of the differences that you would see between somebody with these preferences at the different ages. A T at 45 may not at all be competitive or feeling overwhelmed with failure from the world, because they know that happens and they know now they have the skills for overcoming that and taking the next step, which at 7 they didn't have that comfort and security in knowing they could manage themselves that well. So that's what I mean about you need to take that developmental level into account.
I think that's very important what you just said, that if we work with children, say with the MTIC or whatever, and we work with adults, say if you use the MBTI step 2 or whatever, it's not just using those two different instruments, it's using it with people that are at different overall development stages, and it's a whole different process. It can't be treated the same. I think that's critical, just the point that you made by saying that.
That's right. But both groups can still learn about differences and learn how to respect choices in the other. so that if I can give them choices, then it is going to develop and grow. But if they never make choices, if they just keep following directions, then it won't. But even recognizing, like when my T-son was a senior in high school, his sister, who was F, had just left for college. So trying to, quote, be a good mom, I said to him, "So how are the grades going, hon?" And in his very direct language, he said, "Look, just because you're missing your daughter doesn't mean you have to supervise me more. My grades have been fine for years. They're still fine." Now, somebody who didn't understand where he was developmentally with his T might have heard that as disrespectful. What I heard was, he's told it to me about as clear as he can say, if I've got my grades and they're doing fine, you don't need to be involved. I'm handling it. So that's when I came by with a saying that said, if your grades are on track, I'll be off your back. If they start to slide, I'll be by your side. Is that agreeable? He said, yes. I said, we're done. It was over.
I like that one. I like supervise too. I think I've been there. Ann, did you have a question?
Yeah, Elizabeth, you may have just answered it with your dust devil or your tornado, but when you were talking earlier about the difference between, under 4, 5, or 6 and everything being in the unconscious, and then things starting to come up into consciousness, and then later in sort of like the middle school years, that kind of cycle happens again. I was wondering, now you may have answered this, but I was wondering if that's because at that age that more of the tertiary function is sort of starting to come into consciousness, so it's sort of like another rest period, and then that is starting to emerge. But then I heard you say that they're kind of all emerging
Right.
at different times. So I didn't know if that, I'm just wondering what then you see as happening in that middle school age where, again, there's that shift that looks so much like, 3-year-olds and kind of like 11, 12-year-olds can kind of look very much the same in a lot of ways.
I do not, this is opinion only from my work with kids, but I do not think it's the tertiary taking a forefront. I think instead it's the child saying, okay, I've learned all the social rules. Now, who am I? So instead of looking for outside guidance, they're looking to re-identify who they are, and that drive is coming from the ego and all of those other parts of us besides our type that say, you have to discover you. So now that you know the social rules, and now you know the traditions, and now you know the customs, and now you know the paths, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? And so that search back in from the inner voice giving them direction, the unconscious drives becoming more conscious. I still think you'll feel a little bit of fourth function, a little bit of third, a little bit of second, a little bit of first. But it's almost like if you've ever been to a huge concert in the park and there's 100 conversations going on and you just hear a lot of noise, and then all of a sudden one of them grabs your attention and you're like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I did that too. And you start talking to that one. Well, I think that's it. The functions are all out there still exploring and playing, but the attention that we focus on, that conscious attention that we give it, that it's the dominant that's still grabbing them, and it's still the dominant and auxiliary. And the tertiary and inferior they're making their comments. I just think they're getting sidetracked, or they might get a cursory attention. Just like adults, when an adult is pressured for time, they go to their best side for expediency. When they are totally relaxed, they will explore their less developed functions because I can and I have the time. Well, if our children are so busy and so overwhelmed with homework and extracurricular activities, they're going to go to their best side and they're going to ignore any voice coming up from that tertiary and inferior, and let all of the focus go on that dominant and auxiliary. And I'm okay with that because they need to get those solid, but I just want us to be, again, opinion, but sensitive to the fact that development, although we talk about it as dominant first, then auxiliary, then tertiary, then inferior, we talk about it as if it's sequential, but actually those are just the ranking and positioning. The development is a lot going on at the same time. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, we've come to pretty close to the end of our hour, and I just wanted to thank everyone for their questions. You know, the question of development came up quite a bit there, and I just want to put a plug in for Elizabeth's book. Not that we, you know, want to make a big sale or anything, but The Developing Child is a great resource if you want to learn about what Elizabeth's done in that field. So you can see it on your screen there. It's available at the CAP site. That's a good one. And if you want to engage with us some more.
Could I just add, this is Anne, I just have a question. I have the older version of the book, Elizabeth. Is the new version with the new cover a rewrite? Is it
No.
significantly updated, or is it the same book?
It's the same book.
Okay.
We really need to significantly update some chapters on development. And I did do a presentation in New York, and it's on the YouTube somewhere about this greater depth of development. And they have asked us to put them into an article that they're going to put in the Jungian Journal. So that will be coming out. But yeah, I think we need to talk about it a little more thoroughly than what the book. The book's purpose and focus was to help people new to the ideas of type find a little bit of knowledge and be able to apply it, that there would be suggestions for applying it. But what I'm talking about is really for people who are really type knowledgeable, who want to take the theory and the depth of the theory. It makes a difference when you're interpreting behaviors in people.
I want to say that's an excellent book, and I think the TF story or something similar to it might be found on about page 41 off the top of my head. I don't remember. But, but the reason I say that, I just purchased somewhere, I think, either 30 or 50 of those books a while back because we're starting to work with the Tribal College on early childhood development and training and so forth. So I'm getting the book out there, at least 30 or 50 people around here.
Well, thank you.
Wow, very nice.
Maybe we need to make the next webinar on development.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds good. Well, until then, this webinar was recorded, and if you want to listen to it again or share it with your friends, it'll be on cap.org website. And of course, you can engage with Elizabeth on the Type for Kids Facebook page and see all the videos that she stars in on the YouTube channel. And of course, you can share information about what we do at typeforkids.org. So thanks everyone for coming. And Elizabeth, thank you so much for your wisdom once again.
Thanks. And guys, you had some really nice questions. That was very nice. I'm impressed with what you're doing out there. So if there are ways to help you, you let us know.
Yes, feel free to email me, rob@cap.org, if you want to carry on the conversation. I can refer you to Elizabeth.
Thank you very much, Cap, and thank you, Murph.
Okay, guys, take care now.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.